Do you need this contraption in your life? Today, the folks over at Etcokei sent me their electric yarn ball winder to try out, so let's see what this little guy can do. I've never had an electric ball winder before. It came with this base, with all the gears inside. It's not as heavy as I thought it would be. And it has a clamp to secure it to your table, which I'll demonstrate soon. It comes with the plug, so it does need to be plugged in, no batteries running out, which is nice. Here's this base we'll pop on to wind the yarn around. So let's start setting everything up. Here's how the clamp works. I'll make sure it's up against the table. Then it's just a bit of righty-tighty until it's secure. The little windy tube has these teeth that match up with the base, so I'll twist that on. Lastly is to attach the yarn tensioner. I've never seen one quite like this before. We'll have to see how that works. But I can tell this part requires one little screw, which is why they provided a tiny screwdriver. Very easy to set up. Now let's plug it in and see what it can do. I'm going to try without yarn first and give the dial one click to the plus direction. Oh, there it goes. This is the slowest setting. Let's crank it up a bit. And there's the fastest setting. That looks wild. All right, shall we try it with some yarn? I'm going to start first with a basic 4-weight worsted yarn. This is Caron 1 pound. Pop my tail into the little holder here. Then to feed the tensioner, we'll pop the yarn onto this first little guide. And the way this spring works is you just retract it, and there's a peg inside that the yarn goes between. The spring just kind of secures the yarn down like so. So we don't actually thread the yarn through the spring or something, which is what I initially assumed. So let's fire her up. In case you're wondering, it runs very quietly. It's actually quieter than my hand crank ball winder. But look, Ma, no hands. Now I know from experience that manual ball winders and machines don't like tension on the end of the yarn being fed into them. And sure enough, when the slack was all used up, the machine got hung up on the yarn that's tightly wound inside the original skein, which does stop the machine. When I let out a little slack, it would wind it and stop, a little more. But with the ball winding itself, I had both my hands free to pull slack out of the yarn ball and otherwise guide the yarn in to avoid tangles. It's actually really cool not to have to crank anything, and the yarn just keeps getting wound. So after a while, the middle of the ball wasn't so tight, and the machine was able to pull it by itself directly from the ball without getting caught up. Look, I'm not touching anything, and my yarn is getting wound into a beautiful cake. I feel like I'm in a yarn factory right now. If you had a traditional hank of yarn and a yarn swift, this thing would kick those up super fast. They say the machine can wind up to 10 ounces of yarn, which is huge, but still not as big as a ball of Caron 1 pound, so I'm going to stop here and see what we've got. Here's my center pull, which stayed secure the whole time. And here's our yarn cake. It's an interesting one. The diamond pattern is kind of pretty. I could see that looking nice on a shelf. I've used ball winders that make shorter, denser cakes in the past, but they didn't have nearly the capacity of this one, like I said, up to 10 ounces. So it had no problem with the worsted. Let's try with a few more yarn weights and textures. I have this Peyton's Grace, which is a light cotton yarn. Let's load her up and see how it does. And the machine had no problem with the skinny cotton yarn. I do want to note that it comes with a silicone stopper that helped keep the chunkier yarn secure so the ball doesn't fly off while it's spinning around or something. But the cotton yarn wound a bit tighter than they did, so the little stopper actually made it kind of hard to get off the machine at the end. But here's how this one caked up. Super quick and easy, so much faster than winding a ball by hand. Now let's try some super bulky weight yarn. This one worked great, and it did get hung up on a knot. The machine is programmed to automatically stop if it gets snagged like that, or if it runs over 8 minutes. So I just helped the knot through the feeder, and to start it again, I just turned it off and turned it back on to resume winding. Aside from a bit of loose yarn after the knot incident, the super bulky yarn performed just fine. Lastly, let's try some fuzzy chenille yarn. No stretch, sometimes a challenge for machines. The chenille yarn caked up perfectly in no time. So, all in all, this thing works like a charm. I love that I can have my hands free to help untangle and guide the yarn, or even go totally hands-free and accomplish other things while my yarn is winding itself. Thanks again to the people at Etcokei for sending me this yarn ball winder. I truly like it, and I'm probably going to use it every day. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye!